Thanks for joining us Behind the Frontline, a podcast providing timeless solutions to everyday workforce and workplace challenges. Frontline Training Solutions is an express employment professionals company, strategically placed between the workplace and the workforce with professionals standing by, ready to combat your unique challenges. Learn more about what we do at frontlineon.com. Well, thanks again for joining us for another episode of Behind the Frontline, where today we're talking about mental health and well-being in the workplace and what employers should know about that to equip their employees for success there. And I'm sitting here with Dan Gowdy, President and CEO of Wedgwood. Say hi, Dan.
Hello. Hi, Nick.
Hello. And I'm also sitting here with Brina Tiemeyer, who's the
Hi.
Director of Clinical Services at Wedgwood Christian Services here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And also Janis, Petrini, who is the co-owner and founder of Express Employment Professionals, a specialized recruiting group in Grand Rapids, and also Frontline Training Solutions,
Hi,
which is
Nick.
who we are.
Thank you.
So, Dan and Brina, I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit about the mission of Wedgwood, also including your background and what led you to your current role at Wedgwood. Dan.
Super. Wedgwood Christian Services has been part of our community for 64 years. We've been serving youth and families all along the way. We focused on youth, but as we served youth well, we realized we need to serve the families well. And so we do that with intensive residential treatment. In our program, we serve kids that have been abused and neglected, that are in the child welfare system. 85% are wards of the state. Many have been human trafficked. And we also, as we serve those youth and their well-being, we realize we need to serve the family well. And so we have a wraparound services, counseling services, traditional counseling, community-based services, and the like, as well as services for autism, children on the autism spectrum.
Oh, fantastic. Brina.
And so I oversee our counseling services, both in the traditional outpatient setting as well as our community-based setting. And going back to my why, or what brought me to working at Wedgwood, is that I originally wanted to invest in the children and the families and the adults that needed someone to walk alongside their journey. And then through my career with Wedgwood, I've been really invested in to now kind of transition my focus to empowering or investing in the clinicians that are, or the staff that are in the direct lines with the clients in the community.
Thank you so much. Janis, maybe you could tell us a little about who you are and who our companies are and why we're so passionate about this topic.
Absolutely. Well, Express Employment Professionals, we've been in business for 28 years in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're part of a large global international organization that's been around for 40 years. So there's 890 individually owned and operated Express Employment Professionals offices, really in North America, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. And it was founded on the principle of helping people be successful and making a difference in people's lives. So every day, we are able to really be the bridge between talent and companies and talent. We're helping companies find talent in all levels, from entry level to office services to skilled trades to professional. And we certainly see, we're studying the workforce and the workplace every single day. We're experiencing what keeps employers up at night. And we're also experiencing just the suffering and struggles of humanity. And we all are leading messy lives and all need help and hope, and work is a place that we can find that. And we also have Frontline Training Solutions, where we are busy every single day investing in leaders and their teams and helping leaders, which is a heavy, heavy burden in leading people. Leading yourself, first of all, is challenging enough, but then leading others as well. And so what we see from our training company is just the challenges of really having to, as a frontline leader or as a leader within an organization or for an organization, is how can I best provide the depth of care that I need to my employees so they can thrive and flourish, not only here at work, but at home. And so I'm passionate about this topic today. It's something that is so important to me because every day I own a company, I have 30 employees, but I'm also supporting companies across West Michigan in helping them to be able to be an employer of choice. And we spend a lot of time at work, and we have a lot of relationships at work. It's a great social network for us. It's a place where we can flourish and thrive and belong, but it's more challenging than ever. So excited to be with both of you today and just learn more from your expertise and really have a great conversation that hopefully can help with some best practices and equip employers just with more resources and knowledge about really how we can all do that more effectively.
That's great. Thank you. And if this is your first time joining us, I'm Nic Dampier, Creative Director here for all three of Janis's companies. But exactly like Janis said, we're strategically placed between the workplace and the workforce, and we're trying to answer questions, especially that's why we started this podcast. We want to answer questions for people of what are keeping companies up at night. What are they, what's plaguing them with problems and challenges, and how can we help eliminate and decrease some of those roadblocks? And one of those being mental health and well-being in the workplace. And so I was hoping that you guys, with your expertise and everything that you do at Wedgwood and everything you've accomplished, in your opinion, why is it important for companies to prioritize mental health and well-being in the workplace?
It's extremely important. And the Gallup talks about engagement, right? And how important it is to not just our productivity, but as Janet was talking about, our jobs are more than just jobs now. It is now required that our jobs align with who we are as people and our values and our interests and our loves and our passions. So the modern workforce is looking for an organization that aligns with who they are. They want to see themselves in their work. And when we are, and therefore the lines with remote work where we can just literally just walk out of our kitchen into our office, the lines between personal life and work life are becoming even more blurred than they already are. Mm-hmm. So it is really, really important that as an organization, if we care about our mission and our purposes, we have to care about the well-being of our clients, of our staff, because they're the ones that's delivering on our client promise, right? And if we're able to consider that and do that, I think we'll have an opportunity for a thriving organization because we got staff that feel supported and feel cared for. So I think the lines between personal and professional are blurred because our staff want values that reflect who they are, but also how we go about our work with virtual is also blurring those lines even more. So it's important that we be conscious and intentional about what it is that we're doing that's building up and considering more than just our work experience, but also the lives of those individuals that are carrying out our work.
Yeah.
And I think if your company doesn't focus on your employees' mental health or psychological well-being, then without that focus, you're going to harm your retention, you're going to harm your talent recruitment efforts, and you're going to see that not pay off in the long run. And so it's better to kind of stop and really focus on it from right now and learn ways to support the staff within your organization.
That's right. Yeah. What's the data showing? What other data have you guys seen?
The data is pretty amazing. And I think what we saw since the pandemic, we saw our workforce demographics accelerated the change dramatically. So when the baby boomers didn't return back to work after the pandemic, they stayed retired. And so we saw that bubble shifting in the workforce. It was accelerated during the pandemic. So now with Gen Zs, at Wedgwood, Generation Z is about 40% of our workforce. That snuck up on me, to be honest with you. You combine that with millennials, that's more than 50% of our workforce is millennial and Gen Z. So I think when we think about, hey, we need to own this mental health, well-being of our workforce, but we also need to do it from their perspective. And when we look at the data, what we saw trending even before the pandemic was not good. The Gen Z is the first generation that grew up with a portal in their pocket. They grew up, their puberty went through the social media revelation. It literally was a rewiring of the child's brain. We had in 2007 the iPhone. 2009 we had the first like and retweet button, which changed our whole psychology about why we post and what we think about what we post. 2010, the forward-facing camera. What did that do? selfies, right? And people are posting, sharing, and comparing. We're comparing everything with everybody all the time. And it's this compare and despair that changes the psyche of a young individual, particularly young girls. And then in 2012, we had Facebook that bought out Instagram and just completely changed the popularity of that space. And so imagine what happened in that is a book that's just been released by Jonathan Haidt called The Anxious Generation. Must read for anybody, any parent, any school professional, any organizational leader, HR professional must read if they want to understand their workforce. What they saw, the surge of suffering, the rates of depression and anxiety from 2010 to 2015 went up 2.5 times. It was more prevalent. That's pretty incredible to me. And the Pew Research reported that and this coincides with the use of the social media. 1 in 4 teens in 2015 reported being online almost constantly. In 2022, that report said that nearly doubled to nearly 50% are online almost constantly. So as what we're finding, we saw the surge in depression. We also saw, unfortunately, the surge in suicide attempts as well. And so, how we view ourselves, how our workforce view themselves, and how they go about communicating has changed profoundly because of those formative years during our adolescence, early childhood.
Wow. Yeah.
One, just a couple of stats that were really telling were from the recent U.S. Surgeon General's report that 76% of U.S. workers reported one symptom of a mental health condition at work. And then 81% of workers reported that they will be looking for an employer that offers mental health resources as they look to select a company in the future for them. So, I mean, that's just unprecedented. And when you think about employers creating an environment that are engines of well-being, that's a whole different ballgame when compared to maybe their thoughts about wellness in the past. So what would your suggestions be to employers as far as how are they going to be an engine of well-being for their employees today as opposed to even 5 years ago?
I think that transitioning the focus to kind of 5 areas. So there's like the protection from harm, connection and community, work-life harmony, and there are always focusing on opportunity for growth and mattering at work. And so I think kind of breaking those down a little bit. So like protection from harm. So we are wanting to have not only like security and safety, but how can employees really understand where their or employers really understand where their employees are coming from is they have to ensure that they are instilling a workforce that is decreasing those long hours, decreasing the excessive workloads, because in return, if you have increased long hours or increased excessive workloads, you're having an increase in depression and you're having an increase in heightened anxiety because you're having an increase in a sometimes reported toxic work environment. In fact, like in 2023, the APA's Work in America survey found that 1 in 5 reported still working in a toxic work environment. And so in that, we need to really, as employers, really need to know how can we protect our employees from harm and provide them that security and safety in the workplace. I think then that leads into that connection and community, right? And so with the connection and community piece, it's more than just social support and belonging, but yet with the Gen Z population, that's what they're really looking for, is that social support and that belonging, right? And so how do we build connection and community in the workforce? We normalize mental health care, and we talk about mental health care as a resource to our staff. We don't talk about it as a weakness. We don't talk about it as something that has a stigma attached to it. It's just a resource to your staff. And I think that in doing that, you are able to address different structural or organizational issues or needs. And so when you talk about connection and community, we really need to operationalize DEI efforts to address those structural like racism, or have employees understand their implicit bias. And you can go down that route as well to increase mental health and psychological well-being in the workforce. I think that, I guess I'll just keep going through all 5 of them, but for like work-life harmony, you really want to encourage that autonomy or flexibility in schedules. So that's something that you think of pre-pandemic to post-pandemic is very different. So we went from a society or a world that was very structured, very scheduled, clock in, clock out type, even for salary. Like it was very a time clock, right? And then you go to fully remote where, okay, well, I'll take a break here and then I'll go back and then I'll take a break here and then I'll go back. Well, Gen Z and millennials are looking for that constant autonomy, flexibility. They want to experience what they experienced during their education. And they're like, well, this is what I did in my internship. This is how I saw the workforce. I didn't see it as I report and I'm out and I report and I'm out. I saw it as it was part of my life. It blurred those lines. And so I think understanding what it looks like for that employee in front of you, like what does work-life harmony look like for you?
Yes.
Hold those crucial conversations and get their take on it versus it's not going to be the same for everyone. So instead of having like an agency-wide, like this is what our schedule looks like, ask the person in front of you,
Yes.
what meets your family's needs or you as a person? And then that will transition you into mattering at work. And so when you matter at work, you really are looking for dignity, or I guess like harmony. And so creating time for your employees to connect, establishing norms, praise, right? Like, so make praise public. Don't just praise your employees in your one-on-one conversations. Make it known. There's so many community awards that you can nominate your employees for. Take the 30 minutes it is to write why this employee under you is thriving in the workforce and let it be known how great your staff are. And then I think that ends with like that opportunity for growth. Everyone wants to know that they are learning or that they're accomplishing the next thing. And so I think knowing that you as an employer have great training opportunities to advance your staff is going to then really have career advancement and a culture for learning. And it's going to really promote the mental health well-being of your staff.
That's so good. I really resonate and love everything you said about, asking them. And it brings me back a few years ago. I actually experienced my own burnout. Before I came to work for Janis, I was working as a creative arts pastor at a church in Virginia, like I mentioned before the podcast. And especially once COVID hit, I was working 90 hours a week, easy. I'd work from 6 a.m. till 3 a.m. sometimes because there's things that needed to get done, and I was at home and that line got blurred. But then I started to burn out because my employers ended up needing more from me, and it ended up being a very thankless job, and it was never enough. And when I mentioned 90 hours, I'm working, my family's not seeing me, and it'd be, well, I need you to do this as well. And they'd call me at 5:30 in the morning and say, I need you to do this. And so it came to the point where I actually experienced my own burnout because I wasn't being talked about. We weren't having those conversations. I didn't feel safe to do that. And it wasn't until I came to work here and saw how employers like Janis was giving that opportunity for us to talk about it and making it a priority that I actually started to heal, and I started to feel safer in that journey. So everything that you listed there, I love. And I actually, we talk about praise, an aspect of praising people publicly, I do know that there are some people who are more introverted, and that would actually cause them to have some anxiety being praised publicly. But there's a list of, other ways you could show appreciation and acknowledgement for their work, like time at the table, face-to-face time with your boss, or, listening to their ideas, or maybe it's a monetary adjustment. But just giving that acknowledgement for their work kind of makes it all better. But even when it comes to like work-life balance and stuff, that's so crucial, so crucial. So what other ways would you say employers can create a supportive environment that encourages employees to speak openly about that, because not a lot of employers, especially what we've seen, is that employees are feeling safe to talk about these things.
What is that? Just before you answer that, a lot of people throw around psychological safety. Is this term that sort of, but what does it really mean? What would you guys say that means?
That's a great question.
Well, I'll start out, and I'll let Brina, the expert here, add on to it. But I think the trauma-informed approach that Wedgwood takes has helped me understand that a little bit better. And for me, it's a focus on resilience, right? So something could happen, an event could happen to somebody, and it could be traumatic to some individuals, and it could be not to others. And so it represents, though, do you have the internal resources and the external supports to address whatever the external events coming out at you? And so when I think about the psychological safety or safety in general, we like to focus on how do we increase an individual's understanding and appreciation for their own strengths, their own internal resources, and the support systems that they have around us. I think both can be focused on and addressed by organizations. We think for sure the support system. Do you have an EAP program? Do you have an open communication with you and your team? Are you authentic with them, and they feel that they are given a fair deal and they can express and that they're heard and things like that? But also focus on the development programs that Brina was talking about that not just focus on competencies and skill-based services, but also the soft skills that are actually, right, sometimes more important, right? The emotional intelligence, the ability to focus on and address problems, but also have good, meaningful, crucial conversations with those around us when things are tough.
Yeah, I think that kind of piggybacking off that, which you did a really good job of explaining the psychological well-being, it's kind of definition, but it's going to be different. So if I went around with the four of us right now and I said, what makes you feel like you're mentally at your best is going to be different than what makes you feel like you're mentally at your best, what makes you feel that, and what makes I feel that. So we could all go around and it's going to be different. And so that's why it's so important to look at the individual that you are wanting to enhance or focus on and ask them what makes them mentally at their best. But also, and an understanding that is going to be unique and individualized. And at times it is going to be okay if you cannot provide what they say makes them at their best. Find a middle ground, because they're going to feel heard that you are even trying. And that is what is so important as employers. We are able to really empower our employees to feel safe, to be able to say, this is what I think I need, and so can we try that? And then the employer coming back and saying, okay, I don't know that I can do that, but I can try this. Is that a happy medium or a middle ground? And then understanding that psychological well-being is trial and error. It's going to transition. So pre-podcast, you shared that you had some children. And so what you needed, for not to put your personal life out there, but what you needed before you had kids is different than what you need now. Yes. Because you have kids. And so I myself am a parent, so I'll share that as well. But so it's very different when you think about each individual, and you want to ensure that when you are looking at the psychological well-being of your staff, you're looking at it from an individualistic versus an organizational standpoint. Obviously, you want to reduce the toxic work environment that we unfortunately still hear about as an organization, but then you want to go even deeper and figure out, how do I focus on that individual?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure you have a lot to say there. That's a really great thoughts.
So many questions.
My first thought is, when it comes to individualistic approach, like for a smaller team, that makes perfect sense. But I'm thinking of some employers who have hundreds of employees. Like, I would love to hear some thoughts about how that can be attainable.
I think there's some. Janis, I'm sorry to step on you, but
No,
I love this question. And Wedgwood, we have 385 individuals, and so it is, and sometimes as organizations, particularly human service organizations, we put too much emphasis on our clients, at the detriment of our direct care staff. And even more so, the detriment of our frontline managers and supervisors. Organizationally, we rise and fall by the strength of our frontline supervisors, and it is one of the least trained, least supported positions in all of our organizations. We take the best worker, and when the position opens up, we elevate that worker to that supervisory role. And what do they do when they feel under pressure? They go back and doing things the old way, which was as a good worker. So you've just taken a good worker, multiplied their job by 10, right? And then when they feel overwhelmed because it's not possible, they burn out and leave the organization, and you're now worse off. You had a great worker, and now you don't have even a great worker. You're empty the best worker and the supervisor role. So we took an inside-out approach at Wedgwood, speaking to Brina's point about the investing in individuals. And I think one of the key skills and key focuses that we have adopted over this last year, and I think more organizations are buying into it, Gallup is all in, is coaching. So people, they don't want a boss. They don't want to command and control. They want individuals that understands their strengths, because strengths, they develop infinitely. Weaknesses rarely develop, right? So they want a coach that understands their strengths and leverages their strengths and doesn't do a directive approach. Query, ask open-ended questions, help that individual discover their path forward. So when we develop our coaching skills, now I love my HR friends, but sometimes they'll use that word coaching in a negative context. Oh, you need some more coaching, and what that means is they got discipline, right? And I think if we truly appreciated coaching from a individual focused, strength-based, a query, appreciative inquiry approach, I think we can really empower organization, and we can multiply great staff to help them bridge that chasm that is the biggest gap in any organization, from good worker to good supervisor. It's one thing to do good work with your hands. It's a far more important thing and far more difficult thing to do good work with other people's hands, right?
Yeah.
And so our ability to take care of our clients, our ability to take care of our frontline staff, mental health, well-being, we have to pour in to the middle of our organization. That's our frontline supervisors and frontline managers. And we did right at COVID, right in the middle of COVID. We were in the middle of it. We're human service. We were essential workforce. We flipped the script on our frontline supervisors. We did a competitive analysis. Now our frontline managers and supervisors and residence program are paid in the 75th percentile. Okay, that's a big decision, but for us, it reflected what the value they are to the organization. We implemented a 2-year training program for them to pour into this. And what it says to them is the training is important, but also says you're that important, and we want to invest in you.
Now, one of my questions, even thinking about the work that you do, is that your team is supporting certainly your residents in their suffering from trauma.
Yeah.
Your frontline team is and really all that you do is in really helping to counsel and support people that are experiencing tremendous suffering. And so one of my questions really was, how do you support, what do you have in place structurally at Wedgwood, or some of the other things that you do there to support your own team who are actually supporting people at the most difficult time of their life?
Well, one of the best things that Wedgwood did was care for the caregiver, and Brina serves on that group, and it is a great focus because trauma isn't just limited to the individuals we serve. Our staff can experience trauma.
Yeah. And so we have a multitude, I will say, that is one of the many reasons I would love to brag about the organization I work for, but a multitude of opportunities to support staff through the hard, heavy work that we do every day. And so not only do we have our Care for the Caregiver committee or organization, and what that is it's an opportunity for staff to confidentially feel supported within the organization to say, hey, I need a little bit of help. And then we also have the EAP program. And so our EAP program allows for our staff to receive up to 3 counseling sessions at no cost for different needs. So that doesn't mean 3 per year. That means 3 per need. And it's not only for the staff, it's for their families as well. And so that is a huge asset to our organization and to our employees that I strongly encourage all organizations to look at. If they don't already have an EAP in place, well, actually just contact Wedgwood and see if what we can do to help you maybe establish that EAP or be a resource for you. Because I would encourage you to look at having that as a resource for all of your employees, and understanding that, not looking at the employee as a holistic person, and so I know we talked a lot about individualizing, but knowing that their stress or their ability to be at their best is also going to be dependent upon those they love and care about. And so that's one thing with our EAP program that I love about Wedgwood, is that if I'm okay, and I'm doing well and I don't need those 3 services right now, but my husband does because he's having a hard time, he can call and get those 3 services, because we care about the family and not just the employee. And and it is still caring about the employee, because you want the employee to know that that heaviness, that worry about their spouse all day, it's okay. Wedgwood's got you, and that you can allow them to get those services as well.
That's so good. Thank you both for sharing that. I mean, she's right. If you don't have an EAP in your organization, you should have one. I know that we have one internally, and it's fantastic to know that that's there if we need it. But when thinking about, we talked earlier about work-life balance and just the importance for that, and how that line can get blurred between professional and personal life. Something I've done a little creative coaching with people over the years, and just especially those who are going through creative burnout, like I went through some form of burnout. And just the idea of margin time and just that white space time. I always like to look at it like a frame. I'm going to get creative geek for you for a second. I kind of looked at it like a framed piece of art, like where you have a canvas and you have a frame around it. And then you have the image in there. So you have your negative space and your positive space, where the negative space is anything around the positive image that attributes to it, that complements it, whereas the positive image is, what your eyes are drawn towards. So if you look at that in terms of personal and professional life, your positive image is your job, your work, your life, and everything around it. Your negative is the idea of rest, idea of margin time, the idea of recentering. What would you say to employers as they're talking to their employees about strengthening work-life balance? Because work's important. Everyone has a job to do. We want our employees to do their job, but also we don't want that line to get blurred.
So let me start out with this from an organizational leadership perspective. I think a leader that is not aware of self can actually do more harm than good. So I would think that you need to start out with a strong dose of self-awareness. If you don't have a coach as a leader, get one. If you don't have a counselor, get one. You need an accountability coach. You need somebody that you can be real with and can be real with you. Leadership is lonely. You need that support. You need that perspective. So that perspective, authentic, genuine, in-person relationship with somebody that's really going to speak truth, can do a lot to help the leader, the organizational leader, become more aware of their stuff, their shadow side. And we all have a shadow side, and being aware of that, we can do less harm, unintentional harm, than good. And so when we think about how do we, how as we as a leader manage space within an organization, we have to start with self and make sure we're at our most successful space, at our best, if you will. I'm leaning in on this Thrive calendar, what the principle of that is, it says that you have about 4 to 5 hours where you're at your prime, and that's where you put your most important things. So if that's from 7 to 11, you put your most important things in that time period as a leader. And I just speak into that and just encourage the listeners to kind of lean in on that from an organizational leadership standpoint. And then how that carries down to the organization. Those particular items, those particular discipline has to start at the top. I'm all in on an inside out approach when it comes to support and development and engagement. But when it comes to these disciplined approaches, you can't expect your staff to do what you're not willing to do. And self-management, self-care, understanding your shadow side, having authentic relationships, I think are really a good start. And then when you talk about it, they can point to it and say, oh, that's what you're talking about. That's why you're doing this. Then not only you become a good voice, you become a good example for your team.
So good.
Yeah. And I think that to kind of piggyback off of that, I think that we all need to kind of remind ourselves that there's the culture, right? The work culture. And we need to know that breaks for people are going to be different. And so kind of going back to your creative image or your white space idea, that's going to look, again, different for people. So sometimes when we hear creative imagery or white space, we think of just stillness. And I'll self-disclose that if you told me to sit in a room with no sound and just sit there, I would not. That would do the opposite effect of fill me up. That would drain me.
Me too.
Absolutely. So, understanding that I have had some executive leaders be like, well, I have scheduled time where they can go to a quiet space and they can just sit in their thoughts and reflect on what they need. And I'm like, that would literally be worse than me not having a break. And so knowing that about yourself, so that's that self-reflection, that self-awareness, and then going back to having that safety or security to say, what I just like, that wouldn't work for me, but instead of sitting in that quiet space, can I be allowed to do this? So can I be allowed to put my headphones on and blast my music? Or can I be like, whatever you need for that moment, can I be allowed to? So at Wedgwood, we have a walking trail. It's the Jesus Trail. And so you'll see staff throughout the day who need that active break or that active white space, and they go for a walk around the trail. And there's no questions asked or anything. You just take a walk and around our beautiful campus, then you go back to your office. And so knowing to give those outlets or to give those opportunities and allowing individuals and to know that it's what they need and they have to become aware of it themselves. And so kind of going back, I really wanted to take a moment you asked, well, what do you do when you have over 100 employees? You can't have those individual conversations all the time. And that's where you need to build on the strengths of of all your employees. So for example, as a leader in an organization, it is not sustainable for you to be the sole person responsible for everyone. That's not sustainable. And so especially when you have an organization with 100 plus individuals, understanding that you're going to need to pour into others who have leadership qualities so that when you may not notice this department is maybe struggling, or because you're focused on this department over here and supporting those staff, well, then you know that you have equipped those within your organization to pick up that department over here and empower them to focus on their psychological well-being. And so as a executive leader in an organization, your responsibility is to really figure out, okay, so who are my other leaders, even if they aren't holding like a leadership title or a leadership position, but who have leadership skills that I can really inform them that I notice it, inform them that they have it, and also empower them to use it when they see others in need.
Yeah. I think emotional intelligence is a lot of what you're talking about, that we know that that's a big indicator of top performance. And I think that we can always continue to grow for emotional intelligence, understanding ourselves as well as our relationship management is really critical to be a great leader. Yes. What we've seen in some organizations is as we've seen companies really focus, is we've seen different structural things like certainly employee assistance programs. We've seen enhanced medical benefits where there's a lot more resources to take advantage of. We've seen a lot of training happening in that frontline leader to recognize when an employee might really be hurting or suffering, and recognizing maybe how does that show up, and being able to have a conversation with that employee to make sure they're okay, and then direct them to resources. We've seen companies bring on-site actual counselors on site now for employees, where several days a week, if you feel like you need to talk to someone, there'll be somebody available. So it sort of takes it away from HR and puts it in the hands of a very confidential, trusted resource that employee can have. We've seen chaplains on site. We've seen an overall executive decision in companies to really make sure that their companies are equipped and have enough resources to be able to care for their employees. And then, of course, a lot of the other things that you spoke about. But is there any other important things that you have seen that are best practices that you would say to companies, small, medium-sized, or large, that in today's world, this is a non-negotiable when you're caring for employees?
I love all those ideas, and I would just speak to the heart of what I think the workforce is looking for: authenticity here. I think if you're a leader, don't think about it as a program or as an initiative or as a project.
Right.
You got to be all in on this. People can tell if this is something that is part of who you are and your value, and it isn't. And so I think when you talk about engaging this generation and this workforce, they're looking for authentic leaders that is honest with themselves. We just had a town hall meeting yesterday, and I closed with, "I love you guys," and I didn't plan it, but I love those guys and what they commit and what they do all the time. I could say I love you, but if they don't know that it's part of my genuine understanding and appreciation for them, and then so I would just speak into that. Don't make it a program. Don't make it a project. And I love all these ideas. I say we need to do them, okay? But be authentic with who you are, and your strengths and your weaknesses with your team, and that's what they're looking for, and that's what they will follow, and because no one wants to be duped, right? You want to know exactly what and what I love about some of these problems, and I started out by talking about Gen Z and what they grew up with and their struggles and the surge of suffering and depression and suicide scores going up. But I think it's going to be that generation that's going to come up with the ideas to get us forward. So I love what Brina said about engaging them, who they are, the individual focused. But if you are authentic and you engage in an authentic way, you're going to get some really good ideas about how what's going, because they're the ones going to connect the technology with the relationships in the workplace that's going to make it work, I believe. So that's my encouragement to leaders.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, both of you are very empathetic leaders, and I think empathetic leadership is the key there, especially when it comes to being transparent and building trust with your workforce. And something you said earlier about how, what did you say, 40% of our workforce right now is Gen Z?
Yeah.
I want to future cast a little bit. I want to think about the next generation, Generation Alpha, because they're coming, right? I have kids that are Generation Alpha. I mean, we went toward middle school last night.
Oh, man.
Like, when did that happen?
Right.
And I know that a big part of what you guys do is you have a residential care program, but you also have the employment training program at Wedgwood, which we're very impressed with. And you get to see and introduce all of these children and teens into the workforce and what it's like. What would you say are some of the top challenges that you're seeing with that future workforce and that you're building at Wedgwood, and what has been working for you to develop the young people that are overcoming tremendous trauma, and what do employers need to know for the future workforce?
Can I take that one? Yeah, so I think that the future workforce there's a couple different ways that you could answer that, and I think that the biggest one that I guess my takeaway message or response to that I would like to give is the safety and security, or what they need is that safety and security to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so
The freedom to fail.
The freedom to fail. Yes. And
Great
so
gift.
I honestly, I could go into all these different higher or overcasting statements to answer that. But I think just that genuine ability to know that it is okay if they make a mistake is where we're going with it. And I think
So
that and empower them to know that mistake is not equal to failure. It is a mistake, and that you can learn from it. And so I think if employees know that they are going to be invested in and have like a growth plan versus a disciplinary action, then they're much more likely to take risks or take chances to really build on their strengths, or to go outside of their comfort and try something new, versus resorting to just my safety of like, this is what I'm good at, this is what I know, this is all I'm going to do, because if I veer off and try, then I'm going to get disciplined. And that fear, it does not help your mental health or psychological well-being. And so if we want to invest in the next generation, not only as employers, but as parents, as caregivers, it's to empower chances for mistakes.
I would just like to support that. Now, Brina and her team, they support children and families, thousands of them. So she knows this well. Generally, what's going on around us is this generation, that generation, is they know that a post, a comment can not only destroy their reputation, but can affect them for their life. And so when you bring up this how important safety is, and the ability that you can make mistakes and actually be stronger for it, is one of the greatest gifts we can offer and extend and to that. And I think it does have a lot to do with the environment with which they're growing up in. The cancel culture, or whatever you want to call it, everybody just compare and despair and point the fingers, and people are just mean online. Offering up a message, a genuine message that goes beyond that, and I just go back to the leader. Then you got to model that yourself for your own. Admit your mistakes, and I think what you'll find is we say this a lot at Wedgwood. Say I'm sorry. Ask for forgiveness, and I think what you'll find out is there's a group of people that's willing to come alongside and forgive and move on.
How do you?
It's good.
What are some best practices about building resilience?
With just to clarify, do you want me to answer that for clients or for
clients that you do, and also how do you build that as a leader in your circle of care with your employees?
Yeah, so the important skills for building resilience is to, I guess going back to, for both clients, it's the answer is actually kind of the same. And so in that, you really need to understand that connectivity is how you empower resiliency skills. So for children, right, if you think of a stool, there are 3 legs to a stool, right? There's 3 things that every child needs to be resilient. It is to have a adult or a caregiver who believes in them, who is supportive to them, and who makes them feel safe. If they have belief, support, and safety, that child is going to be resilient. And that does not mean that person that owns that stool is mom or dad. It means an adult, a caretaker, a caregiver can then encourage that child for resiliency. Well, when you go into adulthood, that is the same thing. You need to find your stool. What makes you feel believed? What makes you feel supported? And what makes you feel safe? Carry that stool, have that stool, bring it with you. And I know I'm using an analogy here. Don't actually walk around with a stool, but again, that is what you need to do to build resiliency. as an adult, but also as a child. I think then the other answer I would give is, if you think about your connections, there are natural supports, but there are also familial supports. There's relational supports. And every type of connection you have is important. So if I would encourage organizations to just give staff this exercise of, all right, so identify your 5 supports that are your strongest, best supports. Now identify 5. They're good. They're ones that if I needed to call on them, they'd answer, but they're not my go-tos. And then identify 5 that you can cut out and cut them out. And know that if at any point you can't have 5 in each area, then it's time to figure out how to get 5, because that's going to build your resiliency. And so really understand. And so sometimes for those creative minds who really need a visual, you can do the 5 strong with like a solid line, and then you do the dotted line for those who are your like, they're good, but not my like go-tos. And then you don't want to line to those who you're cutting out. And that's your visual, how you can visualize that activity as well.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you both so much. I got one final question, and we talked a little bit earlier about the importance for retention. We know that employees who experience well-being in the workplace are most likely to stick around, and retention is the number one priority of companies as they face shortage or just high quit rates. You know, we see it every single day. The importance of retention and importance of employee engagement. So I just want to know, final takeaway, what's your best advice or just other advice left out on the table? What steps should a company be taking, non-negotiables in today's world for mental health and well-being in the workplace?
Yeah, I think the one thing that changed my thinking on retention and this, what resources and investments we need to have in well-being and mental health was understanding the true cost of turnover. The hard costs for Wedgwood are about $10,000. We believe the total cost, the indirect and direct cost, the client confidence, payer confidence, staff morale, and so forth, it's about $30,000 per turnover. If we made leadership decisions with the true understanding of what the total cost of turnover is per staff, then we might make different decisions about what investments we make along the way. And so that, especially that first 6 months of employment, where people are testing the water, seeing if this works for them, if it aligns with who they are, and so forth, pouring in, making real, meaningful relationships with those colleagues around them. They see themselves in the work they do, and that builds that individual engagement. And so for me, as leaders, understanding the true cost of turnover, and then rethinking our priorities about what types of investments we make in a preventative way early on in the process to engage new employees in the work. And focus on the talent that we have. We took an inside-out approach, and we increased our training and increased our pay relative to the market for our frontline supervisors and managers. And we said the well-being of supervisors translates to well-being of staff, translates into the well-being of our clients.
Can I ask one add-on question, Nick? So as a CEO of a large organization, what was the turning point for you to make that decision?
It's about a 30-year decision. I fortunately was a frontline employee, working with direct care, was a supervisor, was a manager, and I got to see every step of that process. I've taken those 30 years. I did go to school, got my doctorate in organizational leadership and servant leadership and organizational change. All of those personal experiences and my academic experiences brought me to that. But one story in particular, if I could, Walt Disney is known for their customer service, and they reviewed all of their adventure, the Disneyland, Disney World. Who has the most influence on customer experience, the guest experience? Is it, Mickey Mouse? Is it the actors? Is it the events? Is it customer service? What they found out was the street sweepers. They had more contact with gas than any other individual. And they found out it was the least paid, least trained position in the entire park system. They flipped the script on that, and they brought the pay up above market, and now it's one of the most highly trained positions in there. And I thought, if we applied that thinking to how we approach our organizations and what we valued about our organizations, so that's what that story and my own personal experience, but those two changed my value system, and that actually convinced me, okay, I want to lead. I want to see how that works in a real life organization with a super strong mission.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's interesting to try to get that breakthrough at a CEO level.
If we could figure out how to make it a line item, if it was a line item on our P&L,
Yes.
we would do something about it. But it's not. It's on staff wages. It's on client
Yes.
revenue. It's on, so many, it's spread throughout it. But if we had a cost of retention line item,
Yes.
we'd do something about
I know.
it. Right?
And
that's
if you
interesting.
looked at that number, the number is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
How much money.
Millions.
I know. Why you're not looking at the thousands and thousands of dollars.
And we know the demographics say the workers aren't there. So that
I know.
So what are you going to do?
Yes,
You're going to
I
have to
know,
continue
every
to go
day.
your way and expect workers to show up somewhere, or
Yes.
you take care of what you have.
Yes.
Because what options do you have here? We think we're just going to
Yeah, the shortage.
Yeah.
There's a shortage.
Brina, what do you have to add?
I think going from a clinical lens, that my takeaway message on this topic would be break the stigma. And in that, be at a company, be an organization that employers do not have to be scared to admit or to say they have a mental health condition and that they need help. There should not be a negative impact to their position or their career when they need help.
Right. Yeah. They shouldn't be viewed as weak or, like incompetent. So good.
Break the stigma. That's
Break the
my
stigma.
takeaway.
All right.
Love it.
Janice, what do you think?
Well, I just appreciate you both so much. It's just a conversation that we're so passionate about it. We're on the front lines with companies every day, and we want to be able to bring them solutions to help them to solve their problems. The most important asset that we have at work is our people. And so anything that we can do to help people thrive and flourish and reach their potential. But when they're suffering or there's anything that's getting in that way, as employers, I think it's our responsibility to be able to help people to be able to have the support and resources they need and help them to reach their potential. So I'm so grateful. I have so many takeaways myself from this conversation. And we just thank you for being the resource that you are in our community, and to all the children and youth that you serve, and to your whole team who are incredible, and for just spending time with us and with this community of listeners about how we can provide a circle of support for people at work and how we can be leaders that can really help our employees to thrive.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. I thank you both so much. Just like what Janice said, if you want to learn more about who Wedgwood is, I spent some time over the past couple of weeks getting to know them and hearing stories, and it's so impactful, the lives that you guys are transforming just through your care and your services. So thank you both so much for what you're doing for the community, and thank you for joining us today. And just like we said earlier, we at Frontline, we develop people, we inspire growth, and we unlock potential. We are on the front lines with leaders every single day, bringing you the resources you need to answer those questions that are keeping employers up at night. And we talked about a lot of really great things today about retention, about the need for investing in your frontline leaders and investing in their coaching skills and investing in your well-being programs at work. And so if you want to know more about that, you can contact us at frontlineon.com. Look in the caption for both our website and Wedgwood's website. We want to help connect you with the care and the support that you need to grow and flourish as leaders. So thank you both so much.
Thank you for having
All right,
us.
we'll see you next time on the front line.